Oh, hello, great readers. I'm Belchan.
I'm Nimakong.
I'm Van Chan.
In this class, I'll read to all of you. 19 of A Tale of Two Cities, book the second golden thread.
As.
Ah.
A Tale of Two Cities, book the second golden thread. Charles Dickens. 19. Worn out by anxious watching. Mr. Roy fell asleep at his post. On the 10th morning of his suspense, slumber had overtaken him when it was dark night. He rubbed his eyes and roused himself, but he doubted. When he had done so, whether he was not still asleep. 4. Going to the door of the doctor's room and looking in, he perceived that the shoemaker's bench and tools were put aside again, and that the doctor himself sat reading at the window. He was in his usual morning dress, and his face, which Mr. Roy could distinctly see, though still very pale, was calmly studious and attentive, even when he had satisfied himself that he was awake. Mr. A disturbed dream of his own. 4. Affect. Unemployed as usual. And was there any sign within their range that the change of which he had so strong an impression had actually happened? It was but the inquiry of his first confusion and astonishment, the answer being obvious. If the impression were not produced by a real corresponding and sufficient cause, how came he, Jarvis Lurie, there? How came he to have fallen asleep, in his clothes, on the sofa in Dr. Manish's consulting room, and to be debating these points outside the doctor's bedroom door in the early morning? Within a few minutes, Miss Pross stood with Spring at his side. If he had had any particle of doubt left, her talk would of necessity have resolved it. But he was by that time clear-headed, and had none. He advised that they should let the time go by until the regular breakfast hour, and should then meet the doctor as if nothing unusual had occurred. If he appeared to be in his customary state of mind, Mr. in his anxiety, so anxious to obtain, Miss Pross, submitting herself to his judgment. The scheme was worked up with care, having abundance of time for his usual methodical toilet. Mr. Roy presented himself at the breakfast hour in his usual white linen, and with his usual neat look. The doctor was summoned in the usual way, and came to breakfast, approaches which Mr. Lurie felt to be the only safe advance. He at first supposed that his daughter's marriage had taken place yesterday, an incidental allusion, purposely thrown out, to the day of the week and the day of the month, set him thinking and counting, and evidently made him uneasy in all other respects. However, he was so composedly himself that Mr. Roy determined to have the aid he sought, and that aid was his own. Therefore, when the breakfast was done and cleared away, and he and the doctor were left together, Mr. Lurie said, feelingly, My dear Minette, I am anxious to have your opinion, in confidence, on a very curious case in which I am deeply interested. That is to say, it is very curious to me. Perhaps, glancing at his hands, which were discolored by his late work, the doctor looked troubled and listened attentively. He had already glanced at his hands more than once. Dr. Minette, said Mr. Lorry, touching him affectionately on the arm. The case is the case of a particularly dear friend of mine. Pray give your mind to it, and advise me well for his sake and above all, for his daughters. If I understand, said the doctor, in a subdued tone. The explicit, said the doctor. Mr. Where he saw that they understood one another, and proceeded. My dear Minette, it is the case of an old and a prolonged shock, of great acuteness and severity to the affections, the feelings, the theas you express at mind, the mind. It is the case of a shock under which the sufferer was borne down. One cannot say for how long, because I believe he cannot calculate the time himself, and there are no other means of getting at it. It is the case of a shock from which the sufferer recovered. A striking manner. It is the case of a shock from which he has recovered so completely as to be a highly intelligent man, capable of close application of mind and great exertion of body, and of constantly making fresh additions to his stock of knowledge, which was already very large. But, unfortunately, the doctor, in a low voice, how did it show itself? I infer, glancing at his hands again. Anne, did you ever see him? Asked the doctor, distinctly and collectedly, though in the same low voice. And when the relapse fell on him, he spoke of his daughter. Oh, it has been kept from her, and I hope will always be kept from her. It is known only to myself. The doctor grasped his hand and murmured, "That was very kind. That was very thoughtful." Mr. Rory grasped his hand in return, and neither of the two spoke for a little while. Anne, my dear Minette, said Mr. Rory, at length, in his most considerate and most affectionate way, I am a mere man of business, and unfit to cope with such intricate and difficult matters. I do not possess the kind of information necessary. I do not possess the kind of intelligence. I want guiding. Guidance. As on you. To me. How does this relapse come about? Is there danger of another? Could a repetition of it be prevented? How should a repetition of it be treated? How does it come about at all? What can I do for my friend? No man ever can have been more desirous in his heart to serve a friend than I am to serve mine, if I knew how. But I don't know how to originate. In such a case, if your sagacity, knowledge, and experience could put me on the right track, I might be able to do so much. Unenlightened and undirected, I can do so little. Pray discuss it with me. Pray enable me to see it a little more clearly. Dr. Minute sat meditating after these earnest words were spoken. And Mr. Roy did not press him. I think it probable, said the doctor, breaking silence with an effort, that the relapse you have described, my dear friend, was it dreaded by him? Mr. Roy ventured to ask. Very much. He said it with an involuntary shudder. You have no idea how such an apprehension weighs on the sufferer's mind, and how difficult, how almost impossible it is. Would he ask Mr. or anyone? I think so. But it is, as I have told you, next to impossible. Now, said Mr. Roy, gently laying his hand on the doctor's arm again, after a short silence on both sides. I believe, returned Dr. Minute. To be continued.